Hello, good morning. The first Hive live for Aries season, the new astrological year. So Aries season does mark the beginning of our astrological year. Aries season is accompanied by eclipse season this year because our nodes are in Aries, North Node Aries, South Node Libra. Because of that, in any of the lunar events that we have in Aries and Libra seasons will be eclipses. So that being said, we are in a 17 or 8 numerological day. So 8 is a good way to pick up the week, but can feel a little challenging if you take the energy of 8, which is like forward motion, like let's do this, let's keep going, or let's pick up the pace. It can feel a little confusing heading into a moon day, Monday situation, building to an eclipse, which is, I think, actually on Monday. So that being said, if you are listening to this, watching this, whatever, before Monday, Monday, what is that, the 25th, then you're right on time. And if you're listening to this afterward, let us know. How did this go for you? The eclipse is centered in Libra. Libra represents our sense of balance and harmony. When we talk about harmony, we talk about giving what is needed to adjust to what is. And this is a continued process. Harmony is not 50-50. Balance is 50-50. Harmony is 60% over here and 40% over here. It's 20% over here and 80% over here, because that's what's needed to continue in response to everything that is, right? So harmony is a continued response to what is. When we look at a full moon in Libra, especially an eclipse in Libra, we are seeing, or we are unearthing from the shadows. A full moon is all about illuminating what's in the shadows. We are seeing what we have been avoiding or what has been buried in our subconscious that is centered around refusing to adapt to what is. Right. So if you have been experiencing maybe a lot of emotional roller coasters in the last 4 to 6 weeks, if you are someone who just kind of knows yourself to be really sensitive to your emotions and very reactive to your emotions, you've probably been feeling that building up to this full moon, because again, Libra is going to illuminate where harmony is needed, and harmony is a continued response to what is, right? So when we're thinking about this, the area of our life that's affected by this full moon, we're going to be illuminating. For me, this is my 9th house. So illuminating where in my 9th house, I maybe feel like fixed in my perspective. The 9th house tends to be very open to perspective. So where I might be fixed or limited in my perspective, maybe where I might have something new to learn that I know I have known that I needed to learn, but I haven't, or something new to share that I've known I needed to share, but I haven't. It's illuminating in the 9th house, where you feel as if you cannot go the distance because you're continuing to adapt to what has been, right? So when we go and look at the different houses and look at where this eclipse is playing out, we want to look to the house that is ruled by Libra, but also the house that's going to have this moon in it. So that's going to involve you looking that up on your personal chart and looking at the degree of the full moon. I don't know the degree of this full moon off the top of my head, but looking at where the moon is rather than just going by the house that's ruled. The house that it's ruled by it is going to be the house that has the longest term impact, but the house that it lands in is going to be the kind of area of life where you're going to see it most clearly. So again, this is Libra, looking to the house that rules Libra on your chart. You also will want to look to your Venus sign and the house that Venus is in. because Libra is ruled by Venus. So to get back to talking about our 17 and 8, our 8 energies starting the week can just let yourself feel whatever energy comes up. The eclipses tend to get a really bad reputation historically. And by historically, I mean in times when maybe we didn't understand telescopes or have the ability to see very far, except from where we're sitting with our own 2 eyes. Eclipses were very, very scary. They hearkened the end of days, right? People were very scared to experience eclipses. There were lots of superstitions about not looking at this lunation, not looking at a reflection of it. You go inside, you basically keep business to yourself, you don't conduct business, and all of it is a little antiquated. If we update it to modern times, you can think of an eclipse as a time for reflection and contemplation. If one were to want to take a silent meditation retreat for 24 hours, a good time to do that would be perhaps on an air sign full moon, especially an eclipse like one that we're about to have, to understand and hear what comes up. So our 8 energy is forward moving. We have this eclipse that's also loading at the same time in the sign of Libra. And again, illuminating where we have maybe had trouble adapting to what is, and hopefully providing guidance for us on how to do that. So the card that we're looking at is actually for the 17 energy. It's a 17 day. The card, I cannot find my deck of cards. I have no idea what bag they're in. I did some rearranging. But I have the guidebook here, and the card is called Time Walker. Wisdom walks silently in those dark spaces between the worlds. Messages arise dreamlike from the shadows, stretching the depths, pulling the roots even deeper. Timeless, these gifts offer themselves to those who seek. In this card, we see many elements that represent both time and timelessness. The sun in total eclipse floats in the cosmos and rises out of the wise elder's head at the same time. Eclipses always create a new perspective when they occur. A yellow rose appears in the center of the eclipsed sun, reflecting the light of day. An eclipsed moon appears in the picture as well, pale in the shadow of the sun. Eclipses historically have been considered portents that the world as we knew it was coming to an end. At the bottom of the picture is Stonehenge at night, one of the sacred planetary sites where time was measured and celebrated by the ancients. An owl, a night bird that is also a symbol of wisdom, overlooks the sacred terrain. In the center, we see a small figure walking through an enormous cave that is both dark and light. The wise elder overlooks the passage of time and is unaffected by the changes it brings. Time Walker asks you to look at things differently and open to new perspectives. This card suggests it's time to change your perspective about an issue or issues that you feel trapped by. The messengers may come in the form of natural forces, or they may be delivered by situations that are outside the scope of your normal experiences. Be open and let your wisdom have its voice in your process. Purpose. Time is our playground to grow in. Time rituals, such as celebrating the change of seasons, measures our growth and changes. Look back over a period of time and acknowledge what has changed in you and what is timeless and constant in you. Wisdom. Find the wise elder within you and ask for guidance about a current difficult situation. Ask to see an overview of the big picture. This is black and white of the card. You can see the eclipse is happening. This is a time for understanding and giving reverence and acknowledgement to all that has passed in the last year. For some people, that may be quite literal. For some people, this is maybe a little more metaphorical, thinking of the metaphorical deaths, that the metaphorical losses, metaphorical experiences that you had over the last year, wins, losses, and everywhere in between, and acknowledging everything that has come before this moment. I made a post a little while ago talking about you're living in the reality manifested by your past self, right? Your present self is the one that keeps this loop open, right? With resentment. There's a quote from Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes. She says, there comes a time in every woman's life when she must decide one thing, whether or not to be resentful. So resentful, we keep one eye looking back here. But the reason we're doing it oftentimes is because we haven't actually acknowledged what happened in that loop to get us from where we are right here. What happened? What was the story? What was the pattern, the time loop, the experience, the era, if you will? What happened here? The reason that we keep our eyes focused back here is because we are desiring recognition for things that have gone, things that have been experienced, and telling the truth about them, right? There is oftentimes with our Libra moons, there is a deep desire to tell the truth, to reveal something that has not yet been revealed, and hopefully do so in a way that cuts through any illusion of self, right? That's what our full moons often do, cutting through the illusion of self. And especially when we consider, if you look at the Justice card, there is like the balance, and then in the middle is the hilt of the sword, and the sword is like the balance point that the scales are balanced on. And it's the sword of truth. So justice is blind, justice is weighed against the sword of truth. So when we do ourselves justice by, moving ahead and we're doing the next thing, and wow, great, this is all really cool, and we haven't done ourselves the tenderness of acknowledging and offering recognition to the loop that we completed. That self-recognition is usually the missing component that keeps us tied to the past. Recognizing ourselves for all of the growth, the versions of us that we maybe had to go through, the trials, tribulations, lessons, experiences that we had that went from here to here. It's kind of like remembering someone who has gone before us. And Time Walker suggests that remaining unchanged by time means remaining steadfast, looking steadfastly toward whatever it is that you're moving toward and continuing to move in that direction. But it is not without acknowledging where we have come from. It is not without acknowledging where we've been, who we've been, and the passage of time that it takes to get there. So this is a full moon. Let's see. Maybe I'll write down some lunar math here. Aries, this one is going to be Aries rising. This one's going to be in your 7th house. Cancer rising, this one's going to be in your 4th house. So Aries rising, 7th house, Taurus rising, this is going to be in your 6th house. Gemini rising, this is your 5th house. Cancer rising is 4th house. Leo rising is 3rd house. Virgo rising is 2nd house. Libra rising is 1st house. Scorpio rising is 12th house. Sagittarius rising is 11th house. Capricorn is going to be 10th house. And Aquarius is going to be 9th house. And Pisces, it's going to be 8th house. All right, so briefly, let's talk about the houses. Aries rising in your 7th house of other people. This is illuminating experiences. Oh, let me see that comment. So Aries rising in the 7th house. Our 7th house is our house of other people. It is our house of the other self, the shadow self. It is the self that is all often concealed to us by us. And by us, I mean by our ego self that says, I have to only be my rising sign in order to, because our rising is often how we're perceived by other people, or what other people perceive in us, but we often struggle to see in ourselves. Because of that, we tend to egoically focus on these traits while ignoring these traits. It's the self that we had to put to sleep in order to uncover and perfect this identity. So Aries, that's in your 7th house. Taurus rising, this is in your 6th house. 6th house is daily routine and ritual. It is health. It is your digestion. If you are a Taurus rising, Taurus and 6th. 6th house, right? Taurus in the 6th house is health, daily routine, digestion. So how we digest information, how we digest things, the environment in which we digest. Digestion is super important. If you do not know your digestion type in human design, I strongly recommend knowing your digestion type and knowing your environment type. If you know your digestion and your environment, you can pretty much figure out how to ride the wave of your own inner cycles in your daily routine and your health and your digestion, and rituals that will actually enhance your life rather than just like kind of casting that paintball method out. Again, so Taurus in the 6th house, this is a full moon in your 6th house. Gemini rising, this is in your 5th house. Our 5th house is our house of leadership. It is our house of desire for community. Understand the desire for community and actually allowing yourself to access community, not always the same things. So our desire for community or connection, our desire for support, our ability to be in uncertainty lies in our 5th house. Our 5th house is creative expression. It is sex drive. It is urges to connect in any form or fashion, for better or for worse. So that was Gemini rising. This full moon is in your 5th house. Cancer rising, this is in your 4th house. Our 4th house, I feel like this is a little bit of a crash course in the houses and astrology, but Cancer rising in the 4th house. Our 4th house is our house of home. It is our house of mothering and being mothered. It is our house of mental health. It is our house of loneliness. It is our house of who we are when we're alone. So your weird solo, single, by yourself behavior that you only do when you're by yourself, that's in your 4th house as well. So again, Cancer rising, this full moon is in your 4th house. Leo rising, this is in your 3rd house. Our 3rd house is our house of communication. Now, I'll circle back to communication because it's also our house of short distance trips and siblings. So those may be themes that are coming up for you, Leo rising. However, may also be communication. Now, communication is everything. It's everything. It's what you're wearing or not wearing. It is what you're saying or not saying. It's your body language. It's the things that you post or that you don't post. It's the car you drive. It's how you conduct yourself. It is the energy you give off when you leave a room. Communication is everything. So Leo rising, you may be experiencing some illuminations in your 3rd house during this full moon. Virgo rising, this is in our 2nd house. Our 2nd house is security. It is foundation. It is the thing upon which we build everything else. It is our sense of money and how we interact with it, values and how we interact with those. So Virgo rising, this full moon is in your 2nd house, Libra rising. This is in our first house. Now, remember, we just talked about the first house when we talked about the seventh house, because I love to talk about them in relation to one another. And our first house is the self that we oftentimes feel we have to be. And that feels like it is what everyone else sees or perceives in us, that we sometimes feel we have to work toward, or work harder for. It feels like maybe we're not good enough, or we're not doing it well enough. And that's typically because it is run by a story in the ego, a program from the ego. Now, remember, the ego is designed to keep things the same. So when I say running a program, this program is intended to keep whatever, we were just talking about, like your present self is living in a reality manifested by your past self, right? It's the ego is who's in charge of keeping everything the same, keeping the time loop exactly the same, right? So when we find ourselves saying, well, I can't do that, I have to do this, we're often like, that's a pretty easy indicator that we're in ego. I can't feel like this, I have to feel like this. I can't act like this, I have to act like this. I can't be that, I have to be this. That is what comes up in our first house. Our first house is also the place where we get to reclaim that outer identity. Now that I have a deeper relationship with my Capricorn rising, it doesn't feel all consuming. It doesn't feel like do or die for productivity, or like worthiness from productivity, constant grinding or climbing. It feels like there's a harmony that exists between the goat and the fish, which is Capricorn's nature. And so being able to, and that was a very intentional journey that I went on during my, well, the pre-Saturn return and then Saturn return, was really concentrated in that area of my life. And so, and even having talked to other people who just finished their Saturn return, Saturn in Aquarius, there was a lot of reclaiming our energy around worthiness and productivity, doing, and worthiness or deservedness. And even, I always tell people, if we're even having the conversation about deservedness, we've lost the plot, because we are inherently deserving of things. And so when we are like, oh man, I really don't deserve that, like, what program is the ego running underneath that? What's the next thought? And then what's the deeper sensation beyond that? And the emotion that's driving it that I was unaware of, that I was like secretly relishing, right? For a lot of people, especially in a first house full moon, it can be a little painful to be told something new about yourself, or be shown something new about yourself. So be tender with yourself if that is the case. Scorpio rising, this full moon is in our 12th house. Our 12th house is our house of subconscious. It is our house of secrets. It is our house where we put things to go to change because we know they need to change. It is where we put things to explore extremes and find ourselves within kind of the edges of those extremes. Our 12th house is, I often describe it as where we put things that we want to hide, right? So shame, blame, guilt, judgment. If you have 12th house placements and you don't experience those things, please holla. I would love to know what journey you took to move through that and hear your story a little bit. The 12th house, I have a 12th house moon. He has a 12th house stellium. And the 12th house can be our own undoing if we're not aware of our tendency to just be comfortable being underwater. The 12th house is a house that's typically ruled by water. It's typically a Pisces house. And so our 12th house is also the change point, the place between worlds, if you will. It's death and everything between death and that Aries season birth, the 12th house, the first, or 12th house into first house birth. And so Scorpio, you may be experiencing Scorpio rising, you may be experiencing a lot of subconscious emotion that's come up in your 12th house. Notice your dreams, write your dreams down, look up your dreams. Scorpio rising, our 12th house is our house of dreams and could potentially illuminate some really direct course of action. Ask your dreams tonight if you want. Ask the eclipse to show you. Sagittarius rising, that's in our 11th house. I love the 11th house. It is your house of community, of chosen culture, chosen family, given culture and family. It is our house of technology. It is our house of connection and community. So Sagittarius rising, this is an eclipse that is happening, a full moon that is happening in your 11th house, illuminating those areas of your life. And we have Capricorn rising next. This is our 10th house. Our 10th house is legacy. That is a really easy cop out to describe the 10th house. It's like kind of like saying Leo likes the spotlight. You're just like, okay, fine. That's a stereotype though. 10th house is legacy, yes, but legacy is not just what we think legacy or think about legacy. It is not just like our savings accounts and, you know, the business or the house that we can leave to our kids or you know, things like that. It is how other people feel when they leave your presence, how other people ongoingly feel when they leave your presence, how what you are leaving behind you when you go. So when we think about Capricorn rising, you may be experiencing a change point in the legacy you thought you were leaving behind. This full moon, again, full moons are intended to illuminate where this has already existed in your life and you've just not been paying attention. So our Capricorn rising 10th house, paying attention to where you are experiencing a plot twist. I'm a Capricorn rising, experiencing a plot twist. And I can tell you personally, it is like so much better when you have other people around you who support you, love you, want you to win, want to see you successful. Community is everything. Aquarius rising, it's 9th house. This, we talked about the 9th house briefly while we were talking about the energy for the day, but our 9th house is our house of spirituality, spiritual students, spiritual teachers, spiritual learnings. Something that has been coming up lately is this kind of like spiritual materialism mindset where it's kind of hard to make any real growth because the energy is kind of scattered throughout all kinds of different practices. So Aquarius rising, you may be feeling an urge to purge your spiritual library and kind of focus. 9th house is this place of long distance travel and trips. It is a place of people, places, and things that you regard as sacred and spiritual. And finally, Pisces rising, last but not least, we have this full moon in your 8th house. Our 8th house is our house of grief. It is our house of death. It's a house naturally ruled by Scorpio. If you look to tarot for support on understanding this archetype, then you will see, if you pull out the Rider-Waite-Smith, or I like to reference the Modern Witch Tarot, if you pull out the death card in those, you will see every stage of the grief cycle present on the card. So the 8th house represents the entirety of the grief process. The 8th house also represents the values by which we derive our meaning. So the values that transcend kind of earthly realm definition of value, right? Money, things, consumerism, into more like love, energy, time, the things that we spend on other people. So our 8th house is our house of values, the same as our 2nd house is, but it's values that transcend the kind of earthly realm, limited first quadrant of your chart, egoic sense of self and the self that you were just given to be. And that is all for our eclipse chat. And I think that is all for today.